Okay, good afternoon. We're going to call to order the Los Osos Groundwater Basin Management Committee meeting. Like to take a roll call?
Director Cody.
Here.
Director Gibson.
Here.
Director Zimmer.
Here.
Jaro Hilsky is not present currently.
Okay, we'll move to pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'll go to item 4, board member comments. Do we have any comments? Okay, hearing none. We'll go to item 5, special presentation. No special presentations. Item 6, the consent agenda. We have item A on the consent agenda, the 2022 budget update and invoice registry.
Yeah, go ahead. Or yeah, we can move forward with the consent agenda.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so do we want to pull anything from the budget or the invoice registry?
Nothing. No. Is there a reason why the last meeting's minutes aren't being reviewed this meeting?
Just staff time and timing of this meeting. It was just, this is the earliest possible date within the month that the meeting could occur. And so had to prioritize other court required items ahead of it.
Very good.
Well, they'll be presented at the next BMC meeting.
Both last meeting and this meeting?
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Charlie. So we're on item 6, the budget update and invoice registry. We don't want to pull it. Do we?
No.
Public comment? on
Yeah,
that?
open it. Did you open it to public comment?
Not on this item yet.
I have nothing to pull.
Okay, we'll move to public comment.
If you'd like to make a comment online, please raise your hand or in person, come up to the podium. And we have 17 people on, or 16 people online, so I'm not seeing any hands.
Could I ask a question? Is it just comment on the consent agenda?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Oh, you have one hand. Give me a moment. Okay. Lindy Owen, you may make a comment online. Hello?
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I was looking over, things are looking like we haven't had to spend too much money on many of the approved allocations. But I wonder if at some point we're ever going to go back and revisit the percentages that each purveyor pays versus what the county pays. I don't see the county doing much proactive to help with anything but financing on the outside. The 500 wells still after 7 years do not have meters on them. Some of the things that the county could be doing with their treated wastewater are not being looked at. I know we're tasking ourselves with figuring that out, but again, I wonder if the county shouldn't be contributing a little bit more at some point, if that's going to be revisited. And that's all. Thank you.
There's no further comment online.
Okay, bringing it back to the board.
I'll move approval of consent.
I could just move to accept the consent agenda.
Okay,
I'll second that then.
all right. We'll accept.
Yeah.
Oh, we need a roll call for that.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll take a roll call.
Just to be safe. Yep.
Director Cody.
Yes.
Director Gibson.
Yes.
Director Zimmer.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, I just, for the public's benefit, I had asked Chairman Ohilsky if we might be able to take up the item on the annual report, just move it up in the agenda, as I have a conflicting meeting far from here at 3 o'clock, and in order to make sure we have adequate time for discussion. If that suits your pleasure, sir, that would be gratefully accepted here.
Okay. So we're gonna go out of sequence on the agenda. We're moving item 9 in front of item 7, public comment. So item 9 is action items, and we have a presentation on the final draft of the 2021 BMC annual monitoring report.
Yeah, if we advance to item 9 and then 9A, and then the next slide, please. So yeah, presented for you in your agenda packet is the final draft, proposed final draft of the 2021 NCMA annual report. And we've presented the findings within the, sorry, not NCMA. Get my head in the right basin, the Los Osos Basin Annual Monitoring Report. We've presented findings from this annual reporting report, I think once, twice, and 3 times if you were lucky enough to attend the LOCAC outreach event in the month of May. And so I don't have a detailed presentation on, the metrics and the other components of the report, as we covered that in our last meeting. But what I do have here on the slide is a summary of some modifications that were made from the public draft that was presented at the last meeting and the final draft that's being presented to the BMC today. Those modifications included in the final report are included in updated upper aquifer number 5 water level elevation. The water level elevation presented in the public draft report did not include the updated reference point elevation from the wellhead survey that was completed in 2020 and 2021. Of note, relative to that, with the updated reference point elevation, as well as the water level that was measured, or the depth to water, more specifically, that was measured in that well, that water level in that well did drop below the protective elevation established for the upper aquifer water level profile. So this is something that we want to pay attention to. There was a corresponding increase in the chloride concentrations. Granted, the chloride concentrations still remain low, I believe approximately 60 milligrams per liter, but it is an increase of from 30 milligrams per liter previously monitored. And so this is something that's identified for further monitoring within the basin moving forward. Again, this is an upper aquifer well, so this is not a lower aquifer well. But the reason we established the upper aquifer water level profile is to also help ensure and prevent that we're not seeing seawater intrusion in the upper aquifer as well. I would also point out that this is a production well, and so water levels and water quality, but really specifically water levels, are very influenced by the amount of pumping that's occurring in that well. And so I think there may have been an increased production from that well in 2021. Additional changes were an expansion of the documentation for how the ag demand calculations are performed. And that additional information was included in Appendix H. And also there's an update to the purge records in Appendix D to incorporate correct well diameter and depth information for the purposes of getting a better estimate calculation of the amount of water that's required to be purged during sampling events. And then finally, there were a number of narrative changes made in response to comments provided to the BMC by various parties. The two most significant comments provided were from the Sustainability Group and the S&T Mutual Water Company. And included in the agenda packet at the very end is the response to comments that was provided by Cleve Harris Geologists to the submitted comments. And then also available at the BMC's website was a response to comments that the Sustainability Group provided, I believe it was yesterday. And so that's been made publicly available as well. So I think that concludes my presentation on the final draft annual report, obviously available for questions that the directors may have.
I have one question, Dan. That response, is that the most current version that's up on the webpage today? You mentioned that there was comments, response, and then additional comments, right? So the most current version with all that's on the webpage.
It is.
Okay. Any other director comments? Questions, I mean, yeah.
I did get input from one of our legal counsel representatives that I believe we needed to vote to change the order of the agenda. So maybe we should do that before we finalize this agenda item.
Okay,
I'll move that we take up the annual report now.
And I'll second that.
Okay, roll call. Director Cody,
Yes.
Director Gibson,
Yes.
Director Zimmer.
yes.
All right, thank you.
I have one other question, if nobody else does, then, regarding the LUA5 well, just want to make sure we went back and double checked those measurements. I mean, anytime I know our operators and taking well levels and things like that, we typically would go back and double check that. Did we double check those numbers just to confirm? I know you did, Ron. I just want to make sure that's clear. All right, that's I have no further questions. So we'll open it up to public comment.
If you'd like to make a comment online, please raise your hand and come up to the podium in person.
Good afternoon. My name is Terry Simons. I'm a planning and development consultant in San Luis County, have been for the last 45 years. I've been following the Basin Management Committee's creation and actions over the last several years. And what started as an adjudication effort seems to have turned into an entire basin management analysis effort with an unbelievable amount of data. And I'm wondering if lost in all the data, we haven't obscured some of the real issues that basin management is intended to do. There's, as I'm sure you're aware, because you incorporated the Coastal Commission's letter to the County of San Luis Obispo in one of your recent meetings, there is a simmering pot over the development in Los Osos between the Coastal Commission and the County Planning Department. In his response to the Coastal Commission letters, Trevor Keith basically says in the second and third page of his letter, the Los Osos Community Plan, which proposes to reduce potential build out, the future build out of infrastructure improvements and attempts to bring several regulatory layers into harmony for the long-term benefit of county residents and important coastal resources, including ongoing implementation of the Los Osos Groundwater Basin Plan and oversight by the Basin Management Committee. That's you guys. So whether you wanted to be or intended to be, or thought when the adjudication started that you would suddenly be a pivotal part of the ongoing future development discussions between the Coastal Commission and the Planning Department. It would appear that both the Coastal Commission and the Planning Department have laid at your feet the necessity to find out what is developable in Los Osos. In order to figure that out, you have in your Cleeth Harris report on page 66, starting a lot of discussion of basin metrics, the most significant of which seems to be the basin yield metric. Unfortunately, it's not clear to me in looking at both county documents, your documents, and some of the coastal input, how everybody is intending to translate your work into the ultimate build out in the Los Osos area. And I would hope that in the next go around of the report, there would be significant effort in that direction. Thank you.
Okay, we have two comments online. First, Larry Real, going to allow you to talk. You're unmuted.
Yeah,
Larry?
this is Larry Rayo with the Los Osos Sustainability Group. This is in relationship to the ag use values that are in the AMR. We hired a hydrogeologist, Stephanie Shkowski, to look into the numbers and what they're used, and she basically summarizes it. Quote, the BMC's draft 2021 annual monitoring report significantly underestimates the groundwater production estimates for agriculture. In estimating the total groundwater usage, the BMC used a general formula for irrigation water requirement, but substituted the irrigation efficiency factor with a calibration factor of 92% so that the calculations would be consistent with historical estimates. The irrigation efficiency factor is a significant variable in the generalized equation used in the AMR, and substituting the efficiency factor with a calibration factor greatly underestimates the agricultural usage in Los Osos. A more appropriate irrigation efficiency factor for the Los Osos Basin is 50%. When a 50% efficiency is used in the formula, the more accurate estimate for groundwater usage by agriculture is 1,130 acre feet rather than the 620 acre feet reported in the AMR. So I just want to say that we still, I know we've mentioned it before, but we still have issue with the ag numbers that are coming in. You know, and there was 28 acres taken out of the ag use. And I guess another question comes up is, you know, how was that determined? Was that, did somebody actually go in the field to verify that that land has actually been taken out? And other questions too, and we'll discuss that at a later point. But just wanted to bring that up. Thank you.
All right, next is Patrick McGivney. You're unmuted.
Thank you. And I hope everybody's had time to read and understand the 433-page packet of information before you, accept and send it to the courts here. And I'd like to thank Dan very much for putting our comments in. I'm with the sustainability group also. This last document that we sent with our response had some typos and things like that in it that we just didn't have time to correct because of the time element. But I just thank you all for looking at it and trying to understand what we're trying to say. In the report, though, that we have before us, Cleeth Harris, geologist, talks about Sigma activities. And I'd like to get this pretty well understood and clear it up a little bit. This is in 2.2.4. And he says, prior to 2019, DWR had identified the Los Osos Valley groundwater basin as a high priority basin subject to critical overdraft due to seawater intrusion and nitrate impairment. In 2019, DWR published the final basin boundary modification update bulletin 118 and reassuring, reassessing groundwater basin prioritization. The Los Osos Valley groundwater basin was separated into two jurisdictional subbasins, the Los Osos area subbasin and the Waldron Creek subbasin. Both subbasins were designated as very low priority for SGMA, although the Los Osos area subbasin is still classified as subject to critical overdraft to seawater intrusion. And according to my conversation with DWR, the reasons for the lower prioritization was that we are now a basin that is adjudicated. We have a basin management plan and a basin management committee to implement that plan. And thus it isn't something DWR is, shall we say, worried about, but acknowledging that the basin is still in critical overdraft begs the question there. In Dan's report, SGMA is also mentioned in a section entitled Basin Prioritization, in which it states the Los Osos subbasin is listed as very low priority for SGMA and in critical conditions of overdraft. DWR explains a basin is subject to critical conditions of overdraft when continuation of present water management practices would probably result in significant adverse overdraft impacts. That is a big reason we need to be back with SGMA, is that our practices right now would probably result in adverse overdraft impacts. And I think that's something that we should all be considering and talking more about, is how we get back, or how we do get under SGMA, which would give us more authority to govern our basin, and also would give us more ability to get funding for the projects we need. Thank you very much.
No more comments online.
Okay, thank you. Bringing it back for director discussion.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'll first and foremost thank our technical staff for getting this together. It's been, as always, a big effort. You know, what we heard in public comment are a number of interesting topics that things like development potential and the question of estimating agricultural use outside the purveyor areas are both worthy topics to be considered, but not really the substance of what's before us today. We're looking at a report detailing what the condition of the basin in 2021 is. And I think that this report does that accurately. I don't see any reason, you know, it's been through an extensive review process. Lots of questions have been answered. Again, we have ongoing issues of deciding what the appropriate sustainable yield, what again, appropriate adaptive management looks like. But this is a documentation of the facts of the basin as of the end of last year. I think staff's done a fine job. So I will be ready to make a motion to support this report at an appropriate time.
All right.
Okay, this is Charlie from S&T, and I also want to thank the BMC staff for the work they've done putting this out. It's not easy, and it's done very quickly. I'm gonna lobby again for approaching the court and asking them for a later date of submittal for this, to allow us a little bit more time to complete the report and review the report. And that'll come up again during part of what I'm going to thank you for. I'd like to thank the staff for the really large improvements that were made to Appendix H that were just delivered essentially 2 days ago. I haven't had a chance to completely review those, but Appendix H is the part of the report that describes the methodology for estimating non-metered water production. And there was a really large effort this year after some comments to provide more information in Appendix H to more completely disclose the methods used for making those estimations. And I really appreciate the effort that was made. I haven't had a chance to completely review that in the 2 days allowed, and I'll do that later. I'd also like to thank the staff for adding the reference on page 3 of the annual report in the executive summary section, which says, approval of the annual monitoring report by the BMC does not constitute unanimous approval of actions listed under section 5.11.4, the approval requirements of the sustainable judgment, or for setting the sustainable yield for a given year. These actions require separate action and unanimous approval of the BMC, end quote. So that's really large, and that question has come up several times over the years about whether or not unanimous votes of the BMC board to accept an annual report had been a de facto acceptance of important policy changes. And now that's very clear that that's not the case in there. I appreciate that. S&T is going to vote no on approving the 2021 AR again this year, as we did last year, for the reason that the sustainable yield figure used in the 2021 report was never approved or adopted by the procedures mandated by the stipulated judgment. Those rules are in the stipulated judgment section 4.2 on page 14. We've gone over this a lot of times. I don't need to read or quote from that. Significantly, the result of using the enlarged sustainable yield figure improperly shows that the basin indicates that the basin had a large surplus of fresh water in 2021, when actually other information provided in this report shows evidence to the contrary. And specifically in one case, that the seawater intrusion fronts continue to exist eastward of a line described as the 100% basin yield metric line, as described in the basin plan document in figure 38 on page 111. So because of that, S&T will vote no. I don't think that that's a big significant issue. Acceptance of this report doesn't require a unanimous approval. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Okay, I would also like to thank, this body for the improvements made over the last year and this year specifically. Appreciate the work of Cleith Harris and Dan, and then the comments from the public, and ultimately getting to the point where we're at today. I think that, these figures and numbers, we have made the adjustments. I'm ready to approve it for Golden State based on its content today. And overall, I think we can make some adjustments next year and continue to improve. I think that's our goal, and that's what we should focus on. As far as the delaying the time of submission, I would prefer we focus in on the report earlier, because we do have 6 months, right? So that's of the year to prepare the report, right?
But then the preparation, the report draft gets first delivered to us in less than 30 days for the review, and then the quote final draft gets delivered to us just within days of this meeting.
So it's the timing of the meetings that's really delayed.
And
okay.
Speaking for S&T, we have a smaller staff. We have all of the chore overhead of a large water company, but with a smaller staff to take care of those chores. But even so, I think you can sympathize also with the same.
Sure.
Yeah,
And
I apologize. I wasn't taking into account the
Yeah.
timing of the meeting.
And I
so-
don't know that the delivery date has any significant issues for the court. I think it was relatively arbitrarily chosen is my guess and could be moved later. And I understand the project management rule that given an amount of time for a project, that time will get filled. So
Yeah.
we have to be careful about providing too much time, I suppose, also.
Right.
Yeah, if I could add some comments just to that, that hopefully will help. Yeah, I would like to acknowledge the efforts of Spencer Harris and Cleith Harris geologists. I mean, they are really the ones doing the heavy lift on the monitoring and preparation of the annual report, and so I want to definitely thank them for preparing it in the timely manner that they do to meet the court deadlines. Yeah, I would agree, Charlie. I'm not aware that there is any specific reason why that is the established deadline. I would acknowledge, though, that it's actually a pretty generous deadline compared to some other annual report deadlines that I'm used to in other basins. I think the Santa Maria Groundwater Basin reports are due on April 30th, which makes it even more fun. But I think there also are some strategies that we can employ to aid in the review. And before I go there, I guess I should say, I think there's limitations too. You know, it takes a certain amount of time for the Cleith Harris geologists to get the data from the previous year so that they can then begin, you know, updating the report and preparing the report. So, you know, I think opportunities to provide data from the purveyors as quickly as possible, maybe opportunities to get data from the county, from their monitoring programs as quickly, and then so we can look for ways to try to streamline those processes in the effort to prepare the report earlier. And then I think other opportunities that the BMC and the parties and the staff can take on are, you know, if there are portions of the report that we have questions, and there are portions where we have questions year over year. I would advocate that, you know, and I can lead this as, you know, as a staff member to, you know, bring those forth to the BMC and in the other parts of the year when we've got a little bit more breathing room to walk through, you know, some of these issues and present current methodologies, evaluate potential alternate methodologies, and then have sufficient time to, if we do want to make a change to a methodology, to fully vet that with the BMC and get, you know, approval, and then time to incorporate it into the next year's annual report. So there's a number of things we can do to try to relieve the burden on the reviewers.
And I think, Dan, you're implementing the October meeting agenda where we discuss sustainable yield and methodologies helps a lot actually too, to relieve some of that overhead.
Yeah. Okay.
Having received and discussed the report, and with again, thanks to staff, I move we authorize staff to submit this draft of the report to the court as our final. We probably rely on you as a second, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I'll second the motion.
Okay, roll call. Director Cody,
No.
Director Zimmer,
Yes.
Director Gibson.
Yes.
Okay, I believe the motion passes 2-1 with Golden State Water representing 38% of the vote and the county representing 20% of the vote. So we have a majority approval of submitting the final draft annual monitoring report to the court. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And I guess I would, again, sorry for my double booking, and I'll hang in here as long, but my absence will break our quorum. So I can hang till 2:30 if that's
Yeah.
a pleasure. So hopefully we can get the rest of our business conducted by then.
Okay. Well, I did notice on Dan's executive director, it wasn't a lot as normal that we have of updates on that part. So I think we go back to our normal rotation of taking public comment now.
Okay.
And item 7, public comment on items not appearing on the agenda.
If you'd like to make a comment online, please raise your hand or come up to the podium in person. And we'll have 3 online after this.
Becky McFarland, concerned Los Osos citizen. Thank you all for serving on this board. And some of mine might be some questions that people can answer later, but I had brought up at the last meeting my concern about how far we allow the seawater intrusion to go. And Charlie had mentioned that there's an actual line that it's supposed to go up to. Someone had said that we're not going to let it intrude any further than it is now. My thoughts are it has intruded quite a bit over the last 10 years. And are the things that the basin management is going to implement going to help push that back out? It seems that would be important because the more water fresh water that's taken out, it's going to be replaced by seawater, which we don't want. And so I would just like some assurance that that is actually going to happen. We're still seeing buildings going up. There's a new house going up on Pine. There's one on Rosina. There's been a number up in Cabrillo Estates. And I know there's been trades, for water credits and things like that. But I've said it before, if the seawater continued to intrude while all those water credits and things were being used, then it wasn't working. And I really hope that the group that's looking at this 2-for-1 and turning it into something else that will wait until we see if that actually works. That's a concern. I mean, I'm a homeowner. Pretty much my whole wealth is in my house. And without a good water supply, we're already saving a lot. I think our family uses about 40 gallons per person in our household, which is a lot better than Riverside. I hear that's using 123. But, we're already conserving, and some of us have been conserving that much before this new 20% that we're being asked to conserve. So please keep us in mind. I mean, I like to water some plants. I switched to all succulents, but yeah, we'd like to be able to know there's going to be water. It's not going to have chlorides in it like Charlie's area. I know it's low in other areas, but S&T's got problems there. There's elevated nitrates. They're going up more. Let's figure that out. And I know you aren't in control of this, but what do we have? 1/3 of the town that's not on the sewer? That's a lot of water not being recycled. So anyway, thank you.
At the risk of trying to take another bite at the apple, but since the previous speaker spoke specifically to the issue of seawater intrusion, one of the anomalies, if you will, that I've noticed going back to the early federal documentation on the basin is that as it has been in the past, there's an exhibit that looks basically like this, and I'll give you some specifics on it. It's unfortunately on my copy of it, it doesn't give me the specifics, but it's in the current report. But my point is that it indicates where well screening is done on the various wells that are identified on this report. And while it's never come up in any of the documentation that I've read, it appears that many of the wells that go deep into the aquifer, that penetrate through the upper and the lower aquifers, are screened in both the upper and lower aquifers simultaneously. And when we start talking about nitrates and salinity encroachment, I'm concerned that, number one, we maybe should plug some of these holes because the capacity of screening, when you have a well, it's like a big tube that goes between the various aquifers. And if that tube is perforated to take water in at a certain level, that water can also migrate through the well casing, either up or down, depending on which way water's moving. And I noticed that L4 in particular is right at one of the most western boundaries. But there are other wells shown on this same diagram that have this duplicity of, maybe that's not the right word, that duplicate screening in multiple aquifers. And I'm concerned that some of the data that you're getting in terms of salinity and nitrates may be confused because of this ability for water to migrate from one aquifer to the next. And I would hope that in the next go round of the Cleith-Harris report, that there would be some discussion included in that. My other issue is that while this whole process was originally intended to adjudicate or to divide up the whole into the various entities that participate, the reality is that the quality of the water in the basin on a whole is quite different. And as such, the most Western purveyor, specifically in this case, S&T, is handicapped by having access to the lowest quality water, whereas the other two purveyors have access to much better quality of water. Short of an overall consolidation of the basin into under either a joint powers agreement or a consolidation of all of the water purveyors into one organization, seems like it'll never be resolved. Thank you.
We have 3 comments online. First, starting with Jeff Edwards. You're allowed to talk. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Chairman Zimmer. My name is Jeff Edwards, and I wanted to cover 2 items this afternoon. The first one is a continued conversation about the need for a comprehensive database of all wells overlying the basin. And I might have mentioned that I obtained a list of all the wells overlying the basin. It's a little dated, back in 2014, but there are some 360 wells on the list. And a couple quick observations. One is that almost 10% of the wells are owned by the county or the state of California, including state parks. So that's almost 36. Many of the wells are on small lots in the urban area. People may not even know they have a well in their yard. And then, of course, how many wells and ultimately what's the demand for pumping east of the creek and within the basin or overlying the basin? Now, the Madaus Title 19 study is supposed to look at a little bit of this, but I'm not sure how they're going to deal with it. I would ask your committee to make this a priority, that is establishing a comprehensive database for all wells overlying the basin. Second topic is a concern I have about the Los Osos is increasingly mentioned in the same breath as Cambria regarding water resources. You know about the Coastal Commission form letters regarding Los Osos and Cambria. That was discussed last month. But now we've got another article in SF Gate dated June 6th, entitled Game Over. The tiny town of Cambria is almost about to run out of water. And while Los Osos isn't mentioned, there are inferences all around us connecting Los Osos and Cambria with regard to water, and that's a false narrative. Cambria, if you don't know, it relies on 2 surface water sources from San Simeon Creek and Santa Rosa Creek, and you know about our substantial groundwater basin. So this is a concern I have. It's getting repeated in the media. Certainly the Coastal Commission loves to cite these kinds of things. So I would urge your committee to perhaps draft a memo distinguishing Los Osos from Cambria. Thank you.
Right, next, Patrick McGivney, please unmute yourself.
Thank you. I'd just like to mention that there's a big difference between monitoring wells and production wells. And in Sigma, they say they should not be used for the same purpose, which we have actually several wells, quite a few wells that are doing both monitoring and production, which doesn't give you the data that you're really looking for, you really need. We do have a production well that's going in program C. There's several of them actually that's going to be going in. And they're talking about the increase in sustainable yield that the second and third program C wells would provide, utilizing criteria for calculating the sustainable yield approved by the Basin Management Committee in October 27th, 2021. Resulting from this evaluation will be presented to the BMC party staff and then to the BMC at future meetings. That's in Dan's report. So we do have production wells going in, which we do need, but we actually need monitoring wells that go in. And in his report, he also talks about lower aquifer monitoring evaluation. And he states that at the October 27th meeting, 2021 again, the BMC authorized Cleith Harris geologists to evaluate the feasibility and cost of modifying existing wells or construction of a new monitoring well to improve monitoring in Zone E water quality. And the BMC staff evaluated the potential to fund a new monitoring well in 2022, but there were not sufficient funds in the budget for that. So we don't have funds for monitoring, which we really need to be able to get the hard data we need. So I think that's where a lot of our money needs to be going. We cannot get budgets for that because we don't have access to the funding that is available if we were in Sigma. So again, I think we need to be looking at possibly going into Sigma as a means of managing our basin. We're not going to be losing our control of the basin. We're going to still be under a basin plan. It is a groundwater plan that Sigma has that we would come up with, and we have to be going under that plan. We do have some oversight from the state to make sure that we're doing the things that the plan says that we need to do, which we are not doing with our basin plan that we have right now. So please, let's get Sigma back on the agenda and let's start talking about that. The pros and cons, it isn't going to hurt. We just need the information. The community would support that. Thank you.
The next, Lindy Owen, please unmute yourself.
Hi again, Lindy Owen. Considering that the climate crisis has only shown more and more detriment to the future of everything that we understand about climate. And I've actually heard discussion of what may be considered a 1,000-year drought on the west coast of our country. I think that we really need to start thinking with much more caution and change some of our habits. I want to bring up again, I think I said it a little bit earlier, the county of San Luis Obispo and developers, they have a huge conflict of interest about what's real about our water basin, because that's how they make their profit. County gets it through development fees and through tax base for new houses. And currently the private and the ag wells are using half at least of our water supply. Well, the recycled waters also not being used the way that it was to be used to offset ground pumping at the schools, at the cemetery, or at the park, and many other ideas that were presented at the time that the sewer was to go in. So I'm very disturbed that the county continues pressuring for new growth, which means new water use. I don't care what kind of offsets you use. We need to be using less water, not equal water. And I feel that it's irresponsible and for them to continue to refuse to put usage metering on all the private wells. That's what they oversee. The private wells contribute not one penny, not 1 cent towards basin management balancing efforts. The purveyors and we customers, we contribute all the money that is going into the cost of a lot of these new wells on our bills. We pay for it. We also are paying for the sewer that was to clean up the water that everybody uses. I'm just very, very tired of feeling that it's us versus them, trying to defend our basin to not be abused and overused when we don't know and we don't see results of anything that's been done currently. It's time to put a halt on all new growth and definitely start not looking at paper money, not looking at modeling, but look at reality and give it time to make sure that we are not overdoing it as we offer, as the county tries to offer more housing out here. It's irresponsible as can be. So that's my comments. Thank you.
Right, we have one additional comment online from Ronnie G. Ronnie, you can unmute yourself.
Good afternoon. My name is Ronnie Hinon, and I am a prospective property owner in Los Osos. I would like to believe that this is one of the areas that I have selected for my personal retirement. And in order to do that, it would be necessary for some modicum of new development to take place. And I don't want to tax any of the resources, any water resources that it might be in Los Osos, but I certainly believe that some control growth can be possible. And I hope that Commission considers that point too, that there are other people that would like to enjoy the resources in San Luis Obispo County. And when I say resources, we would like to live and be part of the community. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
There are no more comments online.
Okay, bringing it back to the director discussion. Dan, do you want to comment on provide a response to any of the comments?
Sure, I can provide some responses. There was a question about how far seawater intrusion can go, and I think it's just important to remind everyone of sort of the latest BMC action with respect to seawater intrusion or determination and extents really is documented in the October 27th, 2021 update to the sustainable yield estimate. And that's where the BMC established its criteria for calculating sustainable yield, as well as the develop, which then becomes a key variable in the basin yield metric. And so that criteria established at that meeting was to, in the calculation of the sustainable yield for the basin, to not allow the seawater intrusion front to intrude any further than the current extents. However, then after you take that sustainable yield in the basin yield metric, the BMC applies a 20% buffer to account for uncertainty, but also to create conditions that would then, as the model predicts, would push that seawater intrusion front back towards the ocean to some historical extent. And so that's really, I think, the latest documented, determination by the BMC on the goals and objectives for the seawater intrusion front. Important to reference that.
Mr. Chairman, if you might just add, the very purpose of the BMC is to bring the use of groundwater in Los Osos into a sustainable level, which will, by its nature, halt seawater intrusion, and the plan constructed does envision pushing it back. So give Ms. McFarland comfort that that's why we're here.
There was a couple of comments about wells completed in multiple aquifers and a well database. I think those are It's important to understand what wells are in the basin, where are they completed, what potential threats could they present to water quality and or mixing between different aquifers. And I think, yeah, there are opportunities to improve the documentation or make that documentation available. And I think there's opportunities to collaborate, not just with purveyors and parties here in Los Osos, but with countywide resources, with the implementation of GSPs within Sigma basins. Many of them include development of comprehensive databases. And so a potential regional database that provides a uniform format for collecting and maintaining this type of data could be a resource that would benefit the Los Osos community as well as other groundwater users in the county. So we'll continue to collaborate with county staff and other groundwater parties on that. I think those were the main ones I had, sort of information to provide in response to questions.
Yeah, and I think that, our groundwater monitoring is something that all of us have agreed on, that we're going to focus in on, improve, and, the opportunities for additional monitoring wells, distinct monitoring wells is important. So I see more of that work coming down the road here.
Yeah, one other one, actually, I recall, there was questions about recycled water use, and just remind everyone, I don't know if it's in the executive director's report, but the county has obtained ARPA funding and is putting that funding to use in connecting the schools to the Purple Pipe recycled water system. And this will provide a direct one-to-one benefit to the basin sustainability. It will help relieve lower aquifer pumping by the purveyors in the western portion of the basin. And so that will provide significant benefits.
Okay.
There is one other issue that Mr. Simons brought up that I think is probably worth addressing, or at least guessing about, and that was his concern that there may be some wells, lower aquifer wells, that have screened intervals both above and below the aquitard, which would short circuit the upper aquifer into the lower aquifer. And I think that we probably aren't prepared at now to address this, but I don't believe that that would be allowed under well design to do that. I couldn't say that that hasn't been done, but if anybody else has any information or guesses about that, do we know of any wells in the basin that have perforations above and below the aquitard? It's in your report.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't speak specifically to the number, but I do, I believe there are some. I think some of the ones shown in the figure, the cross section there's multiple wells being shown in one location, so they may not all be being screened in upper and lower. But I think that's something we can bring up at a staff meeting and engage Spencer Harris on. He's the most knowledgeable with in terms of what wells are currently in the basin and where they're screened. So we can bring that up and investigate that further.
Okay, any further discussion? We'll close public comment. Director Gibson, are you?
Sorry to blow your quorum, but I thought Marshall was going to be here. So.
Well, I don't know that we need a quorum for the executive director report. I mean, it's more of a receive and file. Ah. Let's see if we're legal.
You could make yourself available to any interested parties after the meeting.
Okay.
Sure, if it's all the same to everyone else, we could do that at the next meeting or whatever you're thinking about.
Yeah, if I'm allowed to say, there's just minor updates to a couple of BMC initiatives in the executive director's report.
And they're in the staff.
And they're in the report. So we could probably forego till the next meeting.
So let's not open that agenda item because then we'll have to take public comment. Okay, we're gonna do we need a vote to move in to adjournment? We're going out of sequence like we did before.
Probably be safe.
Move that we adjourn.
I'll second that.
Well, do
I
we,
think my
do we need to
question was,
move to
We're,
defer the exec?
Chair's prerogative.
Okay.
I mean, we trail things all the time. So.
okay. Okay, so there's a motion on the floor to adjourn and a second, then meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm sorry about this. I communicated with Marshall and thought he was going to be here, so sorry to blow your